Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. When I first moved into apartment 3B, I thought I'd finally caught a break. It was cheap, fully furnished, and close to campus. The landlord, an old man with shaky hands, told me it used to be a two-person unit, but now only one bedroom was available. "The other room's locked," he said, eyes avoiding mine. "Belonged to the previous tenant. Don't open it, all right?" I laughed it off, thinking it was just some weird landlord rule. The place smelled faintly like lavender, mixed with something metallic, maybe rust. I didn't care. After months of sleeping in my car, anything with walls and a bed felt like luxury. That first night, I unpacked my things, made instant noodles, and watched the city lights from my window. Around 2 a.m., I heard faint footsteps above me, but the old man had said the top floor was empty. When I checked, the sound stopped. Silence. Then I heard a soft knock on the door of the locked room. Slow, deliberate. I froze. 3 knocks, then quiet again. I told myself it was the pipes, or my imagination. But as I tried to sleep, I could still hear faint breathing, just on the other side of that locked door. The next morning, I found a small piece of paper slipped under my bedroom door. It wasn't there last night. In messy handwriting, it read, "Stop making noise at night." I blinked in confusion. I hadn't made any noise. I looked around, half expecting someone to jump out. The only other apartment on my floor was empty. I had checked the listings myself. When I showed the note to the landlord, he frowned. "Probably kids messing around," he muttered, avoiding eye contact again. "Don't worry about it." But that night, it happened again. Another note. This time it said, "Don't touch my things." I stared at the locked door. "Is someone living in there?" I whispered to myself. I pressed my ear against it. Nothing. Later, when I turned off my lights and tried to sleep, I heard faint movement, a slow, dragging sound, like someone pacing, barefoot, on old wooden floors. I checked my door lock twice, heart pounding. At exactly 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. Airdrop request from roommate 3B. I didn't even have airdrop turned on. The following week, I began noticing a stronger scent coming from the locked room. It wasn't lavender anymore. It was something foul, like spoiled meat masked with perfume. Every morning, a new note would appear under my door. The handwriting grew more frantic. "I hear you in my room. Stay out of my closet." I started to lose sleep. My grades were slipping. Every creak in the night made me jump. I even bought a small camera to record while I was out, just to prove I wasn't going crazy. When I reviewed the footage that evening, my hands trembled. Around 2:40 a.m., the door to the locked room moved slightly, just a few inches, then closed again. But that wasn't the worst part. For 3 frames, I saw something standing behind my bedroom door, a pale figure with tangled black hair staring toward the camera. And then it vanished. I packed my bag, ready to leave, but the main door wouldn't open. The lock had been jammed from the outside. That night, the knocking started again. Louder, faster, closer. I didn't sleep that night. The camera footage kept replaying in my head. That pale figure, those hollow eyes staring directly at the lens. I unplugged the camera, stuffed it in a drawer, and sat awake until sunrise. The landlord knocked around 8 a.m., asking if everything was fine. I wanted to tell him everything, but something stopped me. His eyes, They didn't look surprised, just tired, like he'd heard it all before. Instead, I asked him about the previous tenant. He hesitated before answering. "A girl," he said softly. "She went missing 2 years ago. Police searched, didn't find her. Her parents still come by sometimes." My stomach sank. "And her room?" I asked. He sighed. "Her family wanted her things untouched. Out of respect. That night, I moved my mattress into the living room, away from that locked door. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, I heard faint humming. A woman's voice, low and trembling. It came from behind the locked door. I turned on my flashlight and whispered, 'Hello?' The humming stopped. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I heard, 'You shouldn't be here. I couldn't take it anymore.' The mystery of that room was driving me insane. I searched every drawer, every cupboard, hoping to find a spare key. Finally, in the back of a kitchen cabinet, I found a small brass key tied with a red string. My hands trembled as I held it up. The metal felt oddly warm. I knew I shouldn't, but the curiosity was unbearable. I waited until nightfall, heart hammering as I approached the locked door. The smell had grown unbearable, rot and lavender mixed into something nauseating. The key slid in easily. The lock clicked. Inside, the air was thick and cold. A single lamp flickered weakly, revealing a dusty room covered in old photos, hundreds of them, taped to the walls. Every picture showed the same woman, pale and smiling. But in the last row of photos, she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, in several of them, was me. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The closet door creaked open slightly. From inside came the faint sound of breathing. Slow, ragged, alive. The breathing grew louder, rough and uneven. I froze, staring at the half-open closet door. My instincts screamed to run, but my body wouldn't move. "Hello?" I whispered again. No answer. The smell was suffocating now. I covered my nose and inched closer. The closet door swung open with a long, dry creak. Inside, there were clothes hanging, dresses, jackets, all coated in a thick layer of dust. On the floor, I saw a small box. I picked it up and opened it. Inside were strands of dark hair, a broken phone, and a necklace with a name engraved on it. Maya. Suddenly, a hand reached out from the shadows and grabbed my wrist. I screamed and yanked back, stumbling into the wall. The closet slammed shut. When I turned around, the room was empty again. But all the photographs, every single one, had changed. Now they showed me standing in the doorway, eyes wide, mouth open, holding that very same box. I ran downstairs to the landlord's apartment, pounding on his door until he opened. "Who is Maya?" I shouted. His face turned pale. He didn't answer immediately, just rubbed his trembling hands. "You saw her room?" he whispered. "You shouldn't have opened it." "Tell me what happened," I demanded. He sighed deeply. "She was my niece. She rented that room while she studied here. One night, she never came out. Police assumed she ran away. But after they left, I still heard her. She'd whisper at night, from behind that door. Sometimes I hear her still." I backed away, shaking my head. "That's not possible. She's dead, isn't she?" He didn't answer. When I got back upstairs, the door to Maya's room was wide open again, though I'd locked it before leaving. Inside, written across the wall in huge letters, was a new message. "Now you stay with me." That night, I locked every door, every window. I even pushed the couch against my bedroom door. But around 2:45 a.m., I woke to the sound of someone walking in the hallway. Slow, deliberate steps. Then came the whisper, faint, almost gentle. Why did you open it? The temperature dropped instantly. My breath turned white. The couch began to move, slowly at first, then with force, scraping across the floor as something pushed from the other side. I held my phone up, recording in shaking hands. For a split second, I saw her, the girl from the photographs, crouched at the edge of the couch, face twisted, eyes black. I screamed, dropped my phone, and everything went dark. When I woke the next morning, the couch was back in place. The door locked. My phone was lying on my chest. The video? Completely blank, except for the last 2 seconds, a whisper near the mic. See you tonight. I stopped eating, stopped going to class. My world shrank to that apartment, that cursed room. I tried to move out, but no one answered when I called the landlord again. His phone was disconnected. Desperate, I packed my bag and headed for the door. But when I opened it, the hallway wasn't there. Just another identical apartment, my own apartment. I ran to the window. Outside wasn't the city anymore. It was pitch black, like endless space, faint whispers echoing in every direction. I turned, and there she was, Maya. Her hair hung in strings, her skin gray, her eyes empty but alive. She smiled. You shouldn't have opened the door, she said softly. Now it's yours. Before I could move, she stepped forward and walked into me. I gasped, feeling a freezing weight in my chest. The world tilted, and everything went black. They found my body a week later, or so I think. Because when I woke up, I wasn't me anymore. I was standing in the dark, inside the locked room. Everything smelled like lavender again. I could hear someone moving outside, footsteps, a man's voice. The landlord. Welcome to apartment 3B, he said softly. The other room's locked. Don't open it, all right? I wanted to scream, to warn him. But all that came out was a faint hum, a tune I didn't recognize until it echoed back through the walls. It was my own voice. I think I'm part of the apartment now. And every night, when the new tenant arrives, I wait behind the door, listening, waiting for them to knock back. When my old roommate, Jason, moved out unexpectedly, I thought it would be months before I found someone new. The apartment was big, and I couldn't afford rent alone. Then one evening, a girl named Lena answered my ad. She was polite, soft-spoken, and said she needed a place urgently. When she arrived, she carried only 2 duffel bags. Her clothes were dark, simple. Her eyes, green but strangely hollow, rarely blinked. Still, she smiled a lot, and that made me feel comfortable. Hope I'm not a burden, she said as she set her bags down. Not at all, I replied, helping her carry them into the spare room. Her grip was ice cold. That night, we shared dinner, talked about random things, music, old movies, places we'd lived before. But every time I mentioned family, she went silent. Around midnight, I heard faint footsteps outside my door. Then my bedroom knob turned slightly and stopped. Lena? I called out. Silence. The next morning, she smiled like nothing happened. Did you sleep well? She asked, voice calm. I lied and said yes. But deep down, something about her presence didn't feel right. A week after Lena moved in, I noticed she never left the apartment. She didn't go to work, didn't have visitors, and always kept her room locked. Sometimes I'd hear her whispering inside, soft, rhythmic, like she was praying. One morning, while cleaning the living room, I found something strange. Under the couch cushion was a photo, a picture of me. It looked like it was taken from inside the apartment. I froze. I hadn't seen anyone take that photo. My name was written on the back, in small, shaky letters. That night, I waited until I heard her shower running. I slipped into her room. It was tidy but unnervingly plain. Just a bed, a mirror, and a small wooden drawer that was padlocked. Curiosity got the better of me. I used a butter knife to pry it open. Inside were more photographs of me, sleeping, cooking, sitting at my desk. Every photo was time-stamped. And at the bottom of the drawer was one that made my blood run cold. It showed me in bed, taken from above, while Lena lay beside me, her eyes open, staring at the camera. After that discovery, I couldn't look at her the same way. Every time she smiled, I wondered how many times she'd watched me while I slept. I didn't confront her. Something about her calmness made confrontation feel dangerous. That night, I pretended to sleep. Around 2 a.m., my door creaked open. I kept my breathing steady, eyes shut. Soft footsteps approached. Then, a whisper. "You're safer when you don't move." My pulse thundered in my chest. She stood there for what felt like an hour. I could hear her breathing near my face. Then, a faint sound of my phone unlocking. In the morning, I checked my gallery. A new photo had been added, me sleeping again. I started locking my door, keeping a knife under my pillow. But each morning, I'd wake to find the door slightly open, as if someone had picked the lock. One morning, she left a note on the fridge. "You move too much at night." I tried talking to my neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, an elderly woman who'd lived next door for 20 years. When I mentioned Lena, she frowned. "Lena," she said slowly, "there hasn't been anyone new in that apartment for months." I insisted. "She's my roommate. Moved in last week." Her eyes narrowed. "Sweetheart, I saw you moving boxes in, but only you. No one else." That night, I waited for Lena to return from wherever she disappeared during the day. Around 10 p.m., I heard keys jingling. The door opened, but I didn't see her shadow, just a gust of cold air. "Lena," I called out. From her room came a faint hum, the same tune she'd been whispering in her sleep. When I looked under her door, I saw movement, bare feet pacing slowly back and forth. But the lights were off. I knocked once. The humming stopped. Then came her voice. "You shouldn't talk to them about me." Sleep was impossible. I set up my phone on a hidden shelf to record overnight. I just needed proof of what she was doing. The next morning, I played the footage. For the first few hours, nothing unusual, just silence. But at 3:11 a.m., my bedroom door slowly opened. Lena stepped in, wearing a white nightgown. She stood completely still, watching me sleep. Then she walked to my bedside, leaned close to my ear, and whispered something. I turned the volume up, my hands shaking. The words were faint, distorted. "He's almost ready." Then something terrifying happened on the footage. Behind her, reflected in the mirror, wasn't my room. It was a dark basement filled with water and hanging ropes. But there was no basement in our building. When I looked up from my phone, I noticed my closet door was slightly open. From the darkness inside, I heard that same whisper. "He's ready now." That recording haunted me all day. He's almost ready. Who was he? What was that basement? I couldn't focus at work. Every time I blinked, I saw that reflection. The water, the ropes, the impossible room. When I got home that evening, Lena wasn't there. Her door was wide open for the first time since she'd moved in. I hesitated, then stepped inside. The room looked wrong. The air felt damp, colder than the rest of the apartment. The wallpaper was peeling in long strips, and under one of them, I saw concrete. Not drywall. Cold, wet concrete. In the corner sat an old wooden chair with straps attached to the arms. I felt my stomach twist. The mirror across the room was cracked, but reflected something strange. Water dripping, rippling beneath the surface, like a flooded basement. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Looking for something? Lena's voice was low, emotionless. I turned slowly. Her face was pale, her pupils dilated. She was holding a wet piece of rope dripping onto the floor. "You shouldn't have watched," she whispered. "Now it knows you too." Before I could speak, she smiled, too wide, and walked straight into the mirror, her body dissolving like mist into ripples of black water. I screamed and ran out, slamming the door shut behind me. After that night, the apartment changed. The walls seemed damp, like they were sweating. Mold crept across the ceiling. Every mirror in the house had faint watermarks, shapes like hands pressed against the other side. I tried to leave. I packed my things and opened the front door, only to find the hallway flooded ankle-deep with black water. The air smelled like iron and rot. I ran back inside, slammed the door, and turned around, only to see that Lena's door was open again. This time, I didn't go near it. I just stared as ripples of water spread across the floor from inside her room, glistening under the flickering light. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from an unknown number. "Don't let it out." Then, from behind her door, I heard something dragging across the floor. Heavy, wet, moving closer. I backed into my room, barricaded the door, and hid under my desk. I could hear the water seeping under the crack of the door, cold against my feet. Then came her voice again, soft, distant, but everywhere at once. "You opened it when you let me in." By morning, the water was gone. My clothes were soaked, but the apartment looked perfectly dry, like nothing happened. I rushed to the building office to find the landlord. When I mentioned Lena, his face went pale. "Lena Woods?" he asked. "You must be mistaken." "No, she moved in 2 weeks ago," I said, shaking. He reached under his desk and pulled out an old file. Inside was a photo, Lena smiling. She used to live here. Drowned herself in the basement after her boyfriend disappeared. That floor was sealed years ago. I felt my blood run cold. But she's in my apartment. He leaned forward, whispering, "That's not her, son. That's what she became. Whatever you're seeing, don't look at it in mirrors." I ran home, desperate to pack and leave. But when I entered the apartment, the walls were dripping again. My reflection in the hallway mirror smiled on its own, whispering words I couldn't hear. From the bathroom, I heard Lena's humming. The lights flickered, and when they came back, she was standing behind me, soaked, her skin pale blue, her hair floating as if underwater. "You saw me," she whispered, smiling faintly. "Now you stay with me." I ran into my bedroom and slammed the door. The humming grew louder, vibrating through the floorboards. Water started dripping from the ceiling, faster and faster, until it poured down like rain. The entire apartment filled with freezing black water in seconds. I tried to open the window, but it wouldn't budge. My phone floated from my hands, flashlight still on. Then I saw her outside the window, Lena, suspended in the water, eyes open, reaching for me. Her lips moved, and the words echoed directly in my mind. "It was never about the room. It's about who follows." Her hand broke through the glass without sound, gripping my wrist with inhuman strength. The water around us began to swirl, pulling me toward her. I screamed, but no air escaped, only bubbles. Everything turned dark and silent. I saw flashes, photos of me, the chair, the ropes, the mirror, all swirling around in a storm of memories that weren't mine. Then, nothing. I woke up on the floor, dry. Morning light streamed through the window. The clock read 7:13 a.m. Lena's door was gone, just a blank wall where it used to be. A month later, I moved out. I told no one what happened. I didn't even take my things. The landlord didn't ask questions. He just nodded and handed me the deposit back. Before leaving, I glanced one last time down the hall. The door to my old unit, 2C, was open. Inside, a new tenant, a young man, was moving boxes in. "Hey," he said cheerfully. "You used to live here, right? Anything I should know?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just keep the mirrors covered." As I walked away, I heard him speaking to someone inside. A woman's voice. Soft, familiar. "Can you help me with this box?" she said. I froze mid-step. My blood turned to ice. I looked back, but the hallway was empty now. Just the faint sound of water dripping. Somewhere below. That night, I got a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of me, standing in that hallway, taken from behind. The caption read, "I moved in again." When I first met Daniel, he seemed like the ideal roommate. Quiet, tidy, polite, the kind of guy who'd wash his dishes right after eating. We met through a university housing board. I was desperate for someone to split the rent, and Daniel's calm, almost soft-spoken personality felt like a blessing. For the first few weeks, everything was smooth. We'd exchange small talk over dinner, weather, work, random jokes. But there was something odd about his room. He never left the door open, not even a crack. If I passed by, I'd hear faint whispers, not voices, but like someone muttering to themselves. One night, when I got home earlier than usual, I caught a glimpse through the slightly open door. Daniel was sitting in front of his mirror, completely still, just staring into it. His reflection looked off, somehow darker than him. The moment he noticed me, he slammed the door shut. That night, I couldn't sleep. From behind the thin walls, I heard him whispering again. And something whispered back. The next morning, Daniel acted like nothing happened. He smiled, made coffee, and even asked if I wanted to join him for breakfast. I tried to shake off the unease, but every time I looked at him, I remembered that reflection. Darker, sharper, wrong. That night, I decided to record what I was hearing. I placed my phone near his room before heading to bed. At 3:17 a.m., I woke to something tapping on my wall from his side. Slow, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. In the morning, I played back the recording. For the first minute, nothing. Then, a low voice whispered my name. Not Daniel's voice. This one sounded like it came from inside the walls. My heart nearly stopped when I heard Daniel reply, "I told you not to speak to him." When I confronted him that evening, he didn't deny it. He just smiled faintly and said, "Some doors shouldn't be opened." That night, I noticed his mirror was gone. But from his room came faint scratching, like nails dragging across wood. The next morning, Daniel was gone. His room looked untouched, except for one thing. A large dark stain on the wall where his mirror used to hang. The air was icy cold, and there was a faint smell of burnt wood. I called his number, disconnected. His belongings were still there, clothes, laptop, wallet. It was like he vanished overnight. I should have called the police, but curiosity got the better of me. I touched the wall where the stain was, and it felt soft, like skin. I jerked my hand back, terrified, but a faint whisper brushed my ear. "He's still here." My heart pounded. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on the stain. The air shimmered, and for a split second, I saw Daniel's reflection in the wall, staring back, his mouth moving silently, eyes wide with terror. When I blinked, he was gone. But his whisper lingered. "Don't look too long." That night, I stayed awake, staring at Daniel's closed door. I'd convinced myself he was gone for good, until I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, dragging steps. The floorboards creaked closer and closer to my room. I froze, barely breathing. The doorknob twisted, gently at first, then violently. I grabbed my phone's flashlight and shined it toward the door. The light flickered. Shadows pooled at the bottom like ink. Then, silence. When I finally dared to open the door, the hallway was empty. But Daniel's door was now open. Inside, the air was freezing, and a faint whisper echoed like wind. "You shouldn't have touched the wall." On his desk sat a mirror, the same one I thought had vanished. Except now, the glass was cracked, and something inside the reflection was moving. A faint hand pressed against the glass from within. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. The mirror tilted, and for a moment, my reflection wasn't me. It smiled, while I didn't. I couldn't stop staring at that cracked mirror. My reflection seemed slightly delayed, like it wasn't mimicking my movements in real time. I raised my hand. It followed, but slower. Then it blinked before I did. My blood ran cold. Behind my reflection, I saw something. Faint shapes shifting in the dark, like silhouettes moving through smoke. One of them leaned forward, revealing Daniel's terrified face. He mouthed, "Help me." I stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. The glass cracked further, and the reflection began to ripple like water. From inside, a pale arm pushed through, reaching for me. I ran out, slamming the door behind me. My breath came in ragged gasps. But as I pressed my ear against the door, I heard muffled crying. Daniel's voice, whispering over and over, "Don't let it out." That night, I left every light on, unable to sleep. But around 3 a.m., every bulb in the apartment flickered out at once. And from the dark hallway came a soft scraping, like nails dragging across glass. By the next morning, the apartment reeked of something foul, a mix of mold, rust, and decay. I opened every window, but the smell only grew stronger near Daniel's room. I hesitated before stepping inside again. The air felt heavy. My shoes stuck slightly to the floor, and when I looked down, there was a faint red smear leading to the mirror. The surface was darker now, the cracks spreading wider like veins. I whispered, "Daniel?" The mirror shuddered. Then, in a whisper that seemed to echo from behind the glass, came his voice. "It's not me anymore." My pulse thundered in my ears. I could see faint movement, dozens of faces, distorted and screaming, trapped inside the reflection. And then I saw my own face among them. I screamed, stumbling backward. My phone slipped from my hand and landed near the mirror. Its screen lit up, and on the live camera feed, someone was standing right behind me. I turned instantly, but no one was there. Only a long, cold shadow stretching toward the mirror. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed my bag, determined to leave. But as I reached the door, the apartment's power went out again. The silence that followed was so thick it felt alive. Then came the whispering. This time not from Daniel's room, but from beneath the floorboards. I crouched down, pressing my ear to the cold wood. I heard muffled voices, dozens of them, pleading, weeping. One of them sounded exactly like me. "Don't leave," it whispered. "You're already part of it." Suddenly, the floor beneath my palm pulsed, once, twice, like a heartbeat. I stumbled back, terrified. Then Daniel's voice came from the darkness behind me. "You shouldn't have listened." I turned around slowly, my phone's flashlight trembling in my grip. Daniel was standing there, or something that looked like him. His skin was pale, stretched too tight, and his eyes were completely black. His shadow didn't move with him. It stayed still, twitching on its own like something trapped in pain. "Help me," he whispered, his voice echoing from everywhere at once. "Break the mirror." I didn't think. I ran straight into Daniel's room, grabbing the heaviest object I could find, a metal lamp. The mirror shimmered in the dark, alive, whispering. My reflection inside it was already distorted, smiling wide and unnatural. I raised the lamp and swung. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces. But instead of silence, the apartment filled with screams. Not from me, not from Daniel. From inside the shards. Each fragment reflected a different version of the room, each with a different me inside it. Some were staring back, some were screaming, one was smiling, still. The floor began to shake violently. Daniel lunged toward the mirror, shouting, "It's too late," before collapsing. The shards on the floor pulsed with faint red light, then went dark. When I looked up, Daniel was gone again. Not disappeared. Gone. No trace, no body, not even footprints. Just that same burnt smell, thick and choking. I ran from the apartment that night and never went back. But sometimes, when I glance into a mirror now, I see something just over my shoulder. Something smiling that shouldn't be there. Months later, I received a call from the landlord. He asked if I'd left something behind. "A mirror," he said. I froze. He explained a new tenant had moved in and found it propped against the wall in the old bedroom. I told him to throw it out immediately, but he laughed nervously. "Funny thing," he said. "When I looked into it, I could have sworn I saw someone standing behind me." I hung up instantly. That night, I received an email from an unknown address. The subject line read, "You left me here." Attached was a photo, a blurry image of the mirror, and in the reflection, I could see myself, standing right behind the photographer. I deleted the message, smashed my phone, and moved across the city. But every night since then, I've had the same dream. Daniel, trapped behind a glass surface, begging me to switch places. And when I wake up, the first thing I see is my reflection smiling before I do. It's been 3 years since that night. I've moved cities, changed numbers, and avoided every reflective surface I can. But last week, I checked into a hotel for work. When I entered the room, there it was. The same cracked mirror. I froze, every instinct screaming to run. But curiosity, it never dies, does it? I took a slow step closer. The cracks seemed deeper now, like veins branching across pale skin. My reflection stared back, lifeless and gray. Then it moved, just slightly. It raised its hand first. I stood still. The air grew cold. The lights flickered. I whispered, "Daniel?" My reflection smiled. Its lips moved slowly, forming words that fogged the glass from the inside. "You're next." The last thing I remember before blacking out was a sound. Glass shattering, echoing from everywhere. When I woke up, the mirror was gone. But my reflection, it still isn't right. It's slower, colder. And sometimes, when I blink, it doesn't. When I first found the listing for the house, it seemed too good to be true. 3 bedrooms, fully furnished, dirt cheap rent, and located in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. The only catch? The landlord insisted I share the place with one long-term tenant already living there, a woman named Nora. She seemed fine when I met her. Mid-30s, quiet, polite, and always wearing the same gray sweater no matter the weather. She said she'd lived there for years and mostly kept to herself. The house itself was old. Wooden floors, antique furniture, and a constant faint smell of dampness. But the strangest part was the basement door. It was locked with 3 separate bolts. When I asked about it, Nora's eyes darkened. "That door stays closed," she said flatly. "Always." I laughed nervously, thinking maybe there was mold or some storage down there, but she didn't even smile. That night, I heard faint knocking from below. Slow, rhythmic, like something gently tapping from the other side of the basement. Nora didn't react. She just sat at the kitchen table, sipping her tea, eyes fixed on the door. For the first few nights, I tried to ignore the noises. Old houses creak, right? But the sounds were too deliberate. Tapping, scraping, and occasionally a low thud that rattled the dishes in the cabinet. One evening, as I was brushing my teeth, I caught something strange. The bathroom vent, which connected directly above the basement, was whispering. It wasn't the wind, it was words. Muffled, shaky, but I could swear I heard, "Let me out." I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth, staring at the vent. When I stepped closer, the whisper stopped. Then, from downstairs, I heard the basement bolts click softly. One by one, I ran into the hallway. Nora was standing there, her face pale, eyes wide. Without a word, she hurried to the door, relocked each bolt, and pressed her ear against the wood. After a few seconds, she turned to me and whispered, "If you hear them again, don't answer." I wanted to ask what she meant by them, but the look on her face, hollow, exhausted, stopped me cold. It was around 2:40 a.m. when I woke to a soft scratching noise. It wasn't random. It followed a pattern, like someone trying to write on the other side of the basement door. My heart pounded as I crept into the hallway. The air was freezing. The old grandfather clock ticked painfully loud in the silence. When I reached the door, I noticed something new. Faint letters carved into the wood, still fresh, splintered around the edges. "Help us." I staggered back, trembling. Nora's door creaked open behind me. She looked half asleep, but her eyes were glassy and fearful. "Go back to bed," she whispered. "It's stronger when you notice it." I didn't understand what she meant, but when I turned back toward the basement, I swore I heard faint crying from below. Multiple voices, all different, all desperate. The next morning, the words on the door were gone, sanded smooth like they'd never been there. By the end of the week, I started noticing Nora's strange habits. She'd place small jars of salt near the doorways and light a candle at exactly midnight, every night, no matter what. When I asked, she said it was just tradition. But there was something more behind her voice, like fear pretending to be calm. One night, I decided to stay up and watch her routine. At 11:59, she lit the candle and whispered something under her breath. Then she looked directly at me and said, "If the candle goes out, don't move." Not even to breathe, the flame flickered violently. A sudden gust of icy air swept through the room, even though every window was closed. From the basement came a low groan, deep, guttural, almost human. The candle dimmed, but didn't die. Nora exhaled in relief. "It's restless tonight," she muttered. Then she turned to me, tears in her eyes. "You shouldn't have come here." That night, I dreamed of the basement door. But this time, I saw fingers curling out from underneath it. The next morning, Nora was gone. Her bedroom door stood wide open, something I'd never seen before. I stepped inside, and the air felt heavy, colder than the rest of the house. The walls were bare except for strange symbols scratched into the paint near the floorboards. Circles, triangles, and what looked like eyes drawn in charcoal. Under her bed, I found a wooden box with 3 latches. Each latch had a symbol carved into it, matching the ones on the wall. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Inside were dozens of old photographs, black and white, worn from age. Each photo showed different people standing in front of the same house. My house. But what made my skin crawl was that every picture had one thing in common. The basement door was open in each of them. In the back of the box, I found a small notebook. Nora's handwriting filled the pages, prayers, drawings, and desperate warnings. It speaks to the lonely. Never answer the knocking. If the door opens, it won't stop until it's full again. The last entry was dated only 2 nights ago. It said, "It's starting over. He's hearing it now." That was the night I first heard my name whispered from behind the basement door. That night, the tapping returned. Louder, faster, almost impatient. Every few seconds, I heard my name whispered again. Closer this time. I tried drowning it out with music, but the knocking followed the rhythm of every song, syncing perfectly like it was mocking me. At exactly 3:08 a.m., the music stopped. My phone shut off on its own, and I was left in total darkness. Then came footsteps, soft but deliberate, coming up the basement stairs. The locks clicked one by one. I grabbed a chair and stood frozen in the middle of the living room, staring at the door. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold my phone's flashlight. The last bolt turned slowly on its own. I heard Nora's voice whisper right behind me, "Don't look." But I did. The door creaked open just an inch. Cold air poured out, carrying the smell of earth and rot. In that sliver of darkness, I saw something. A pale, human-like hand gripping the edge of the doorframe. But the fingers were wrong. Too long, too many joints, twitching like spider legs. Then the door slammed shut hard enough to rattle the windows. The next morning, all 3 locks were back in place. But the metal looked new, as if freshly replaced. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the couch until sunrise, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. Then I heard Nora's voice again, coming from the basement. "Please," she cried, muffled but clear. It tricked me. Don't open the door. My blood went cold. If Nora was downstairs, who was I living with? I ran to her room. Everything was gone. Her clothes, her belongings, even the symbols on the wall. The box I'd found was now empty. The only thing left was the faint outline of handprints on the wall, burned into the paint. I ran to the front door, but it wouldn't open. The locks turned, but the door wouldn't budge. Then the whispering began again, this time all around me. From the walls, the floor, the vents. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was dozens, all saying the same thing. "Let us out." I covered my ears and screamed, but underneath the noise, something else whispered. Softer, familiar, right next to my ear. She let me in. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I opened my eyes, it was already dark again. My phone was dead, and the house was silent. Too silent. I stood up and noticed something new on the walls. Faint outlines of faces, like someone had pressed their skin against the paint from inside the walls. Their mouths were open, frozen mid-scream. Then I heard a faint hum coming from the basement. It sounded almost mechanical, a steady pulsing rhythm, like a heartbeat echoing through the floor. I followed the sound, even though every nerve in my body told me not to. The closer I got, the stronger the hum became, until it was vibrating in my bones. When I touched the basement door, I felt it. A pulse, slow and heavy, like the door itself was alive. Then, the whispers started again. Dozens of voices murmuring together, forming one low chant. One left, one must open. The doorknob turned slightly beneath my hand. I pulled back, terrified, but the air around me thickened like invisible hands were pushing me forward. I screamed Nora's name, hoping she'd answer. But the whisper that came back wasn't hers. It was mine. At 3:33 a.m., the power came back. All the lights flickered on at once, too bright, almost blinding. Every bulb buzzed, and the house trembled like something massive was moving beneath it. The basement door shook violently, the locks snapping one by one. This time, I didn't try to stop it. Something inside me knew it wouldn't matter. The door burst open, throwing me backward into the living room. What came out wasn't a shadow or a creature. It was a shape made of thousands of twisting limbs, writhing like smoke and bone at the same time. Eyes blinked open across its surface, human eyes, hundreds of them. And every single one looked directly at me. From within the thing, Nora's voice cried, "I told you not to look!" I crawled backward, trying to reach the front door, but the floor stretched beneath me, warping like liquid. Every picture frame on the walls turned to face the basement, and the faces inside them began to move. Then, everything went silent. The creature leaned forward until its eyes filled my vision. One word escaped its mouth, echoing in my skull like a memory that wasn't mine. Stay. I woke up hours later, lying on the floor. The house was quiet again, the basement door sealed shut with new locks, heavy ones, bolted deep into the frame. The sun was rising. Everything looked normal. But when I checked my security camera footage, I saw something that made my blood freeze. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the cameras showed me walking to the basement door, but I never opened it. Instead, I turned toward the camera, smiled, and whispered something before the feed cut to static. The final frame before it went black showed the basement door wide open and dozens of hands reaching out from the darkness. I don't remember doing any of that. I don't even remember smiling. But now, every night at the same time, I hear the whisper again, right behind my bedroom wall. It no longer calls my name. It just says one thing over and over again. Help me open it again. When I moved to Chicago for my new job, I didn't know anyone. Rent was high, and I needed a roommate fast. I posted an ad online, looking for clean, responsible roommate for 2-bedroom apartment. Within hours, I got a reply from a guy named Evan. He said he worked nights, was quiet, and barely home. Perfect, I thought. When he came to see the apartment, he was polite, soft-spoken, and oddly formal. His handshake lingered a second too long, but I ignored it. He didn't bring much when he moved in, just a small suitcase and a black duffel bag he kept locked. I assumed it held personal stuff. For the first few weeks, everything was normal. He paid rent on time and even cleaned the kitchen without being asked. But one night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to a sound from the hallway. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, stopping right outside my door. Then I heard a whisper. Not words, just breathing. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty, except for one thing. My bedroom door handle was warm, like someone had just held it. The next morning, Evan was in the kitchen, sipping coffee, calm as ever. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked. His voice was smooth, but there was a flicker in his eyes, like he already knew I hadn't. Over the next few days, little things started bothering me. My toothbrush was wet when I hadn't used it. My closet door would be slightly open when I was sure I'd closed it. Once, I came home early and found Evan standing in my room, looking at my bookshelf. He smiled when he saw me. "You have good taste," he said, then left without another word. That night, I decided to stay awake. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again. Slow footsteps in the hall, the same measured rhythm. This time, I looked through the crack of my door. Evan was standing perfectly still in the dark, facing my room. He wasn't moving or saying anything, just watching. I waited, barely breathing. After a few minutes, he turned and walked into his room, closing the door silently behind him. When I checked the time, it was 3:33 a.m., and every night after that, the same thing happened. Always at 3:33, I needed proof. So I bought a cheap motion-activated camera and hid it on the bookshelf facing my door. I told myself it was just paranoia, that maybe Evan was restless or working odd hours. That night, I forced myself to sleep. In the morning, my heart was pounding as I checked the footage. At 3:33 a.m., Evan's door opened. He stepped out, barefoot, head tilted slightly as if listening for something. Then he walked straight to my door. He stood there for 6 minutes, 6 whole minutes, breathing quietly, not moving. Then he placed his hand on the handle, leaned forward, and whispered something I couldn't make out. But the last frame before he turned away made my stomach drop. He looked directly into the camera, as if he knew exactly where it was, and smiled. When I confronted him later, he acted confused. "What camera?" he said. His eyes didn't blink once. I didn't tell him I had deleted the footage. But the next morning, the camera was gone. For the next few days, I avoided Evan as much as possible. I left early, came home late, and kept my door locked. But the tension inside that apartment grew thicker every night. One evening, I noticed a strange smell, metallic, like rust and something rotten, seeping out from under Evan's door. I knocked softly, pretending concern. "Hey, you okay in there?" No answer. The smell got worse each day. Finally, when I couldn't take it anymore, I waited until he left for work and went inside. The room was colder than the rest of the apartment. No furniture, no posters, nothing except his black duffel bag in the corner. And taped to the wall were dozens of printed photos. Photos of me, sleeping, brushing my teeth, eating dinner. Every single one was dated and labeled with times. Some had notes scribbled under them. Smiles less this week. Talked to neighbor too long. Woke up early? Why? Then I heard footsteps outside. I barely had time to slip out before the door opened. Evan walked in holding grocery bags, but his eyes darted toward the wall instantly. He froze, and I realized something horrible. One of the photos was missing, the one from the night before. It was sitting on my bed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I could hear Evan pacing in his room for hours, back and forth, until the sound became rhythmic, almost like a chant. At dawn, I heard the front door close. He had finally left. I went straight to his room again. This time, I focused on the duffel bag. The lock was small and cheap, so I forced it open with a screwdriver. Inside, wrapped in plastic, were used disposable gloves, a small camera lens, and what looked like clumps of hair. My hair. Underneath that, I found a small leather notebook. It was filled with notes written in precise handwriting. Observations about my daily routines, my food, my dreams, even my body language. The last page read, "Subject seems suspicious. May need to accelerate stage 3. Before I could process what that meant, I heard the front door click open. Evan was back. I shoved the bag under his bed and sprinted to my room, locking the door just as his footsteps approached. He stopped outside my room again. This time, he whispered softly, "You shouldn't go through people's things." I couldn't stay there any longer. I told my boss I was sick and started looking for new apartments. But something inside me needed to know what stage 3 meant. So while Evan slept the next day, I could hear his faint snoring. I plugged a USB drive into his laptop. To my surprise, it wasn't password protected. The desktop was almost empty except for one folder titled Project Roommate. Inside were hundreds of files, each labeled with names, dates, and photos. Not just me, other people. Dozens of them. Some were marked completed, others said missing. The last file was a document titled Stage 3 Integration. I clicked it open. It was a script, a conversation template for mimicking emotions, building trust, mirroring behavior. Detailed notes about personality syncing, tone of voice, breathing patterns. And at the bottom, one final line. Integration is achieved when subject stops seeing the observer as separate. Suddenly, the snoring stopped. "Are you using my computer?" Evan's voice came from the doorway. I ran. I didn't think, didn't pack. I just bolted down the stairs and into the street. The morning air hit my face, and for the first time in weeks, I felt free. I called the police and explained everything. The files, the photos, the duffel bag. They said they'd send someone immediately. I waited outside, watching the windows, but Evan never came out. When the officers finally arrived, they searched the apartment. They found the photos, the notes, and the bag, exactly as I'd described. But not Evan. His room was empty. His laptop was gone. One officer asked if I had any family nearby. When I said no, he nodded grimly. "We'll file a report," he said. "But if I were you, I'd stay somewhere else tonight." I checked into a motel. Exhausted, I fell asleep instantly. At 3:33 a.m., I woke up to the sound of breathing. Slow, deliberate. From the closet, I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called the police again. But before I could speak, the line went dead. Static filled the speaker, and then a voice whispered, "Stage 3 complete." I threw the phone across the room. When I turned back toward the closet, it was open all the way, but no one was there. Then my phone buzzed again. A new text message. It was from Evan. "Check the mirror." I looked at the motel mirror across the room. At first, I saw only my reflection, pale, trembling, terrified. But then, as I stared closer, I noticed something wrong. My reflection wasn't breathing in sync with me. It blinked a second too late. And then, slowly, it smiled. I left the motel before sunrise. I didn't care where I went. I just drove. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. Hours later, I stopped at a gas station to rest. As I walked into the bathroom to wash my face, I saw it. A message scratched into the mirror above the sink. "Welcome home." I froze. There was no way Evan could have known where I went. When I got back to my car, there was something on the passenger seat. A single photograph. Me, sleeping in the motel bed. My reflection smiled faintly in the glass window. And this time, I swear I saw him standing behind me. Inside the reflection, not outside it. I moved again. New city, new name. I changed everything. Haircut, job, even my mannerisms. But no matter where I go, people still call me by my old name. They say I look familiar. Sometimes I catch myself smiling the way Evan did. Sometimes I speak in his tone without realizing it. Last night, I woke up at exactly 3:33 a.m. My door was open, and someone whispered from the dark, "Stage 4 begins soon." I turned on the light. My reflection didn't. When I moved into my new apartment in Denver, the landlord mentioned something odd. He said, "Your roommate likes privacy. She mostly keeps to her room. Don't worry if you hear her moving around at night." I didn't think much of it. I just needed a cheap place close to campus. The room next to mine was always locked, and sometimes faint footsteps echoed behind its door. The strange thing was, I never saw her, not once. There was a mirror in the hallway, tall, old-fashioned, and carved with floral patterns. At night, I'd sometimes catch a glimpse of movement in it, like someone walking behind me. But when I turned, no one was there. One evening, while studying, I heard whispering, faint, rhythmic murmurs. It sounded like a woman reciting something under her breath. I went to the hallway and froze. The whisper wasn't coming from the locked room. It was coming from the mirror. It was subtle at first, a shape forming in the reflection. A woman standing just behind my shoulder, her head tilted, eyes black like oil. I turned around instantly. Nothing. But when I looked back at the mirror, she was smiling. From that night on, I stopped looking into mirrors after dark. But the reflection didn't stop looking back. A week passed, and I still hadn't seen my supposed roommate. But every night, I'd hear soft movements, a chair sliding, drawers opening, faint humming. Sometimes it sounded like someone pacing in my room when I was half asleep. One morning, I asked the landlord if my roommate was out of town. He looked puzzled. "No one's rented the second room since last year." "Why?" My heart skipped. "You told me I had a roommate," I said. He frowned. "That apartment's supposed to be empty. You sure you're in Unit 3A? But I was. And I definitely heard her. That night, I decided to prove it. I stayed up, phone recording, sitting near the hallway mirror. Around 2 a.m., the apartment temperature dropped sharply. The air smelled like damp wood and iron. Then the sound began. Faint, dragging footsteps from the locked door to the mirror. I aimed my phone at the hallway. The reflection moved before I did. A pale woman in a torn dress walked across the frame. But in the real hallway, nothing was there. She paused in the mirror, staring directly at the camera, lips moving silently. When I replayed the footage, her voice came through in a whisper. "Let me out. I didn't sleep that night." Every creak of the floor, every sigh of the wind felt alive. When dawn broke, I covered the mirror with a blanket. The apartment felt lighter immediately, as if I'd closed a door I shouldn't have opened. But that night, I woke up to the blanket on the floor. The mirror was bare again, and this time, fog had formed across its surface. Words appeared, written in something that looked like fingerprints. "We share this place." I ran. I stayed at a friend's dorm for 2 nights, trying to convince myself I was hallucinating. But when I returned, things had changed. My bedroom mirror had fog marks too. A handprint smeared right across the glass, and the strangest thing, the reflection didn't match the room. My bed was in the wrong spot. My lamp was flickering in the reflection, though perfectly still in real life. I stared for too long, and then I saw her again, crawling up behind me inside the reflection. My breath froze as her hand reached for my shoulder, but I felt nothing, only the air shifting slightly behind me. When I looked again, she was gone. But the mirror's surface now showed two reflections standing in my room. One of me, one of her. I started researching the building's history. The local library's records mentioned a woman named Lydia Moore, who used to live there in the 1980s. She was reclusive, obsessed with mirrors. Rumors said she believed they trapped lost souls. Neighbors reported hearing her talking to someone when no one was around. One day, she was found dead in her room, her wrists slit, her body positioned in front of a full-length mirror. The mirror, apparently, was never removed. The address matched mine. The more I read, the sicker I felt. I raced home, wanting to see if her name was marked anywhere on the mirror. And it was, faintly etched on the wood frame. Lydia M. That night, I locked my bedroom door and stayed awake with the lights on. At around 3 a.m., my reflection blinked, but I didn't. Then it smiled. Slowly. The lights flickered out. The reflection moved toward me, her pale hand pressed against the inside of the mirror. I stumbled back, tripping over the bed. The glass surface began to ripple like water. A whisper filled the air again. Clearer now. You took my room, now take my place. The mirror bulged outward, stretching like something was pushing through from the other side. I grabbed my phone and bolted for the door, but the handle wouldn't turn. It was as if the metal had fused into the frame. The mirror's reflection showed me yanking it open, but in reality, it didn't move. I could see her in the reflection standing behind me again. Her mouth opened wider than any human could manage, black liquid dripping down her chin. Then, everything went silent. No sound at all. Not the hum of the fridge, not the traffic outside. Just a low, humming vibration that seemed to come from the glass. I backed away slowly. The surface of the mirror quivered, and faint cracks began to spider across the glass. I thought it would shatter. But instead, it pulsed, almost breathing. Suddenly, the mirror went pitch black. My reflection disappeared completely. I felt something cold brush against my arm, and my body went numb. Then, from the darkness inside the mirror, her face appeared again, right against the surface. She mouthed something slowly, deliberately. I could barely understand it. "Switch with me," I screamed, throwing a blanket over the mirror. When it fell silent again, I collapsed to the floor, shaking. For the rest of that night, I didn't dare look at a single reflection, not even in my phone screen. The next morning, I decided I couldn't stay there anymore. I packed my things fast and called the landlord. When he arrived, I showed him the mirror. "That thing needs to go," I said, trembling. He frowned. "What mirror?" I blinked. "The one in the hallway." But when I stepped out, the wall was bare. The mirror was gone. The landlord stared at me, confused. "You're imagining things, kid. We removed all the mirrors from this floor after the accident." My heart dropped. "Accident?" He hesitated. "A student lived here 2 years ago. Kept saying her roommate was trapped in the mirror. They found her dead, stabbed herself in front of the wall. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled back into my room. The air was freezing again. And on the wall where the mirror had been, faint smudges outlined its old frame, like it had only just been taken down. I caught movement in the corner of my eye. My laptop screen was black, reflecting my face. And behind me, Lydia was standing again. She whispered through the speakers this time. "You took my place." I slammed the laptop shut, packed everything, and ran out. I didn't even lock the door. I moved into a friend's apartment across town that same evening. New walls, New space, no mirrors anywhere. I tried to forget. I even told myself I'd had a breakdown. But then, one night, something strange happened again. While brushing my teeth, I noticed a faint reflection in the window pane. It wasn't the city lights. It was her, Lydia, staring back at me, her hair floating as if underwater. I screamed, dropping the toothbrush. My friend ran in, asking what happened. When I pointed to the window, the reflection was gone. But the glass had fogged up, and a single message was written there. "You moved?" "So did I," my friend laughed nervously, thinking I was pranking him. But I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room until dawn, every reflective surface covered. The next few days, reflections began to distort again. My phone camera glitched whenever I accidentally caught my face. My reflection's eyes always lingered a moment too long before matching my movements. One night, while half asleep, I woke to the sound of soft tapping. I followed it to the bathroom. The mirror I had covered with a towel was moving. The towel was rising and falling, like something breathing underneath it. I couldn't take it anymore. I called a local priest, desperate for help. When he arrived, he examined the bathroom mirror and immediately stepped back. "There's something attached to you," he said quietly. "Not the mirror." He performed a cleansing ritual, chanting under his breath. For a moment it worked. The air grew lighter, the room warmer. But when he sprinkled holy water on the towel, it hissed like acid hitting fire. Smoke rose. The priest paled. "She's not trapped," he muttered. "She's following you." Before I could ask anything, a loud crack echoed. The mirror shattered under the towel. Shards flew across the room, cutting my arm. But instead of falling to the floor, the shards hung mid-air, showing different reflections of the same thing. Lydia's face, screaming silently. I fell backward as the pieces clattered down. The priest grabbed me and shouted prayers louder, pushing me out of the room. When we looked back, the shards were gone, completely vanished. He turned to me, trembling. "You must burn everything that ever reflected her. Every photo, every screen, every mirror you've looked into since you moved in." But how could I? How could I destroy every reflection of myself? I followed his advice. I smashed my phone, my laptop, every mirror I could find. I even avoided puddles, dark windows, and glass doors. But it didn't matter. She found new ways to appear. In my dreams, I'd see her reflection in my own eyes. In one dream, she whispered, "You broke the mirrors, but I'm inside you now." When I woke, I felt heavier, slower, like my body wasn't entirely my own. I stood before a blank TV screen and saw her reflection smiling instead of mine. I tried recording it. The video showed only static. But in the last frame, for a single second, Lydia's face filled the screen. I showed the priest, but he wouldn't come back. "It's too late," he said over the phone. "She's merged." I didn't understand until I saw it. My reflection moving on its own again. But this time, it wasn't trapped. When I turned away, she turned toward me, and her reflection reached out first. I'm writing this from a motel outside the city. Every reflective surface here is covered with sheets or towels. I haven't looked at myself in a week. My skin feels different, colder. Sometimes I hear her voice echo in my head, whispering from somewhere deep inside. "Your turn." Last night, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the car window. It wasn't mine anymore. Her pale skin, her black eyes, her crooked smile, staring back where my face should have been. I think she's winning. Every hour, I feel myself fading, like I'm being pulled into a glass cage. My voice sounds different too, hollow, like an echo. I keep the lights on, hoping it'll stop her from coming through. But the mirror on the bathroom wall has started to fog again, even though the shower's cold. There's writing on it right now. I can see it through the sheet covering it. It's time. If anyone ever rents apartment 3A on Harper Street, don't touch the mirror. Don't look into the glass. And if you ever see a reflection smile before you do, run. Because she's still looking for someone to switch with. When my best friend Jamie and I found our first apartment together, it felt like freedom. Cheap rent, decent neighborhood, 2 bedrooms. The only weird thing was the previous tenant had left in a hurry. The landlord said she broke her lease overnight and didn't explain why. Our apartment was small, just a kitchen, a hallway, and 2 rooms facing each other. Jamie worked nights at a hospital, so most evenings I was home alone. I got used to hearing her come in around 3 a.m., dropping her bag, opening the fridge, then heading to her room. One night, I heard the usual keys, footsteps, the fridge door. But when I texted her, "Long shift?" she replied instantly, "Still at work." "Be home after 4, I froze. The footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, moving from the kitchen down the hall. Then they stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, gripping my phone. After a few seconds, the footsteps retreated, and I heard her bedroom door creak open. The next morning, I found her bedroom light on. Her blanket was pulled down like someone had been lying there. But Jamie hadn't come home at all that night. I didn't tell Jamie right away. She was exhausted from her shifts, and I didn't want her thinking I was losing it. But over the next few nights, strange things kept happening. I'd hear the bathroom faucet turn on at random hours. Sometimes the TV in the living room would flicker to life, playing static. Once, I woke up at 2:47 a.m. to the faint sound of someone humming from Jamie's room. When she finally came home one evening, I told her everything. She laughed at first, then stopped when she noticed something. Her bed sheet had a long dark stain near the pillow. We pulled it off. The stain was old blood. Jamie's face went pale. She called the landlord immediately, demanding to know what had happened to the last tenant. He was quiet for a long time before saying, "Look, she just left suddenly. I don't know why. But that night, we found something that said otherwise." Jamie was cleaning under her bed when she screamed. I ran in and saw her holding a Polaroid photo. An old one, curled at the edges. It showed a man lying in her bed. His eyes were open. He wasn't smiling. The date on the photo? The same week the last tenant vanished. Jamie couldn't sleep after that. She insisted we keep her door locked every night. I didn't argue. Around 3 a.m., I woke to faint scratching sounds, not from her room, but beneath mine, like fingernails dragging along wood. I pressed my ear to the floor. The sound stopped. Then came a slow, steady breathing. I jumped up, flicked on the lights, and moved the rug aside. The floorboard near my bed had a small gap, wide enough for air to move through. I knelt, shining my phone flashlight into the crack. For a second, I saw an eye looking back at me. I screamed and stumbled away. But when Jamie came running, the sound was gone. We both stared at the floor, hearts pounding. The next morning, we called maintenance. The guy pried the board open, shining his flashlight down. His face turned white. "There's a crawl space," he said. "Looks like someone's been living down there." Inside, they found a dirty blanket, a broken phone, and dozens of Polaroids, all taken from inside our apartment. Some of us sleeping, some of us cooking, one of me brushing my teeth, and every single photo had the same man in the background, standing perfectly still. Jamie and I moved everything out of her room that night. We slept together in the living room with all the lights on. Every sound made us jump. The landlord promised he'd get the crawl space sealed in the morning, but I didn't believe him. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard movement again. Not from below this time, from inside Jamie's room. The soft creak of the bed. I tiptoed toward her door, trying not to breathe. Through the crack, I saw her blanket slowly rising and falling, as if someone was lying underneath it. "Jamie," I whispered. From the couch behind me, Jamie's voice answered, half asleep. "What?" The blanket moved again. I grabbed a kitchen knife and kicked open the door. The bed was empty, but the blanket was warm, and on the pillow lay another Polaroid, this one of me sleeping on the couch. The timestamp? 2 minutes earlier. We didn't sleep that night. The next morning, we told the landlord we were leaving. He tried to calm us down, saying, "Look, that crawl space is sealed now. There's no way anyone's still in there." Jamie snapped. "Someone's been inside our apartment." He sighed, finally admitting something. The last tenant complained about hearing someone under her bed. Police came, found nothing. She left the next day. That was all he said. Jamie begged me to help her check one last time before packing. We lifted the rug again, removed the nails, and opened the floorboard. The space was pitch black. It smelled like rot. I lowered my flashlight and froze. The man was lying there, motionless, staring up at us. His skin was gray, eyes wide open, but his lips moved slightly. Jamie screamed, and the man twitched, crawling backward into the shadows. I dropped the board and stumbled away. We called 911 immediately, but when police arrived, the crawl space was empty again. Only the Polaroids remained. The police searched the entire building. They found an old service hatch in the basement that led into the crawl spaces connecting all the apartments. Whoever he was, he could move freely under the floors without being seen. They found a small makeshift bed down there, along with food wrappers, empty bottles, and a camera bag full of undeveloped film. The officer looked disturbed. "He's been here for months," he said. "Maybe longer." Jamie and I spent that night at a motel, but even there we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I kept seeing movement in the mirror, just flickers, like someone ducking out of sight. The next morning, the detective called. They'd developed the film. Every roll contained hundreds of photos, all taken from beneath the floorboards, looking up. There were pictures of people sleeping, eating, changing clothes, from multiple apartments. But the last set of photos were different. They showed me and Jamie moving out of the apartment. The final photo? The motel room door. From the outside, that night, Jamie refused to stay another minute in that motel. We drove to her cousin's house 3 towns over. She tried to laugh it off, saying, "He's gone now." It's over, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of something heavy scraping the floor. At first, I thought it was the house settling. Then I heard the faint creak of a door opening. Jamie's cousin Noah called from the hall, "Jamie, did you leave your window open?" Jamie ran into his room. The window was wide open. Curtains fluttered in the cold wind. And sitting neatly on the bed was a Polaroid camera. Jamie's name was carved into the plastic. Noah ran outside to check, but there were no footprints, no sign of anyone. Only a faint smell of dust and something metallic, blood, maybe, lingering in the room. We burned the camera that night in the backyard. The plastic melted, bubbling with dark smoke that smelled sickly sweet. But when the fire died, something was left behind in the ashes. A photograph. It was of us standing by the fire, burning the camera, taken from just a few feet away. Jamie started having nightmares. She'd wake up gasping, saying she saw him standing over her bed, just staring. I told her it was trauma, our minds trying to process fear. But then I saw it too. One night, I opened my eyes and saw a figure crouched at the end of the hallway. Just a man-shaped shadow, completely still. I blinked, and he was gone. But in the morning, there were muddy footprints leading from the hallway into Jamie's room. We called the police again, but they found nothing. The windows were locked from the inside. No forced entry. Jamie stopped sleeping entirely. She'd sit up all night, eyes darting to corners, whispering that she could hear breathing under the bed again. Then, one night, she vanished. Her phone was left on the counter, still playing music, her shoes by the door. But she was gone. On her bed was a single Polaroid. It showed her lying exactly where the picture was taken, in that same bed. But with the man sitting next to her, his face pressed against hers. The police launched a full investigation, but no trace of Jamie was ever found. I couldn't bring myself to go back to that apartment or the motel. I stayed with family for weeks, jumping at every sound. One evening, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. It was taken in my new bedroom. I was sleeping. And in the dark corner of the room, barely visible, stood the man, watching. I dropped the photo and tore apart the room looking for cameras. Nothing. The locks were untouched. That night, I dreamed of a whisper close to my ear, almost gentle. You shouldn't have left her. When I woke, the photo was gone. But my door was slightly open, and a faint trail of muddy footprints led toward my bed. I'm writing this now from another city, the fourth one I've moved to since Jamie disappeared. I've changed my number, deleted all social media, even stopped taking photos. But last night, someone slid an envelope under my door. Inside were 3 Polaroids. The first showed my current apartment building from across the street. The second showed my door. And the third, my bed, empty, with a note scrawled on the bottom. Can I sleep here tonight? I don't know who he is or what he wants. But I know one thing. Wherever I go, he finds me. I can feel it when I close my eyes. That sense of being watched. Sometimes I even hear the faint click of a camera in the dark, followed by that slow, steady breathing I'll never forget. If you ever find a Polaroid lying somewhere that doesn't belong to you, don't pick it up. Don't look at the picture. Because once you do, you're already in the next one. And that was 7 most disturbing true roommate horror story for sleep. From haunted reflections to the hidden man under the floorboards. Every one of these stories reminds us of one thing. Sometimes it's not the ghosts that scare us most. It's the people living right next to us. If you made it this far, remember to leave a comment saying where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Thanks for watching. This was Dark Fears.